My hands trembled as I replayed the conversation over and over in my head. My daughter, Lily, my flesh and blood, telling me to stay away from her baby. From my grandchild. I still couldn't grasp it. A few weeks ago, everything had been fine. I had helped her through the stress of the pregnancy, given her advice, and supported her in every way I could. I was supposed to be a part of this, part of the family, a grandfather. But today, everything had changed. Before we continue, kindly hit the subscribe button and leave a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story reaches. I tried to speak when she said it. I really did. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I felt this choking tightness in my throat, this pressure building up in my chest, but nothing, absolutely nothing would escape. It was like my body was betraying me, just like she had. "Don't come around here again, Dad," she had said, her voice so cold it froze me in place. "We don't need you. It's better for the baby." Better for the baby. My mind screamed at me. Better for the baby? That was the excuse she used to push me away? To reject me like I was some stranger, some nuisance, like I didn't matter at all? I could feel my pulse quicken as the weight of her words sank in. She had said it so flatly, like it wasn't even hard for her. No hesitation. No remorse. Just, done. Her words kept echoing in my mind, replaying over and over again. "Don't come around here again." The finality of it was suffocating. How could she do this to me? After all these years, after everything we had shared? Was this how it ended? I couldn't even look at the spot where she had stood. It was like a knife, twisting deeper with each passing second. My daughter, my own flesh and blood. And yet, she had cast me aside like nothing. I never saw this coming. I thought I had done enough. I thought I mattered to her. But standing there, at the door of the house that had once been filled with laughter and love, I realized the truth. I didn't. I wasn't wanted anymore. I turned away from the door, unable to hold back the burning sensation in my eyes. My chest ached with a raw, unbearable pain. I tried to keep my composure, but the emotion, the betrayal, it was too much. It was suffocating, crushing, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop myself from feeling like I was drowning in it. But no. No. This wasn't the end. It couldn't be. I wiped the tears away quickly, furious with myself. I wouldn't break. I couldn't. Not now. Not like this. I had to do something. Anything. I couldn't let her win. Couldn't let this be how things ended. I would make sure she understood the mistake she'd made. This wasn't just something I could accept. Not when I'd given everything for her, for our family. And you, whoever you are, wherever you're watching this from, stay tuned. This is just the beginning. Something tells me you'll want to see what happens next. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the coldness in her eyes as she pushed me away. I couldn't escape it. It was as if her gaze was branded on my soul, an imprint that wouldn't fade. I'd been a good father. I'd given everything I had for her. My time, my energy, my love. And now this? This betrayal? It didn't make sense. The silence of the night was oppressive. The ticking of the clock seemed louder than it should have been, each second dragging like a heavy weight pressing on my chest. I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, my mind spinning. I tried to block out the thought of her, Lily, but it was impossible. I couldn't stop thinking about the words she had said to me. "We don't need you." The words echoed through my brain again and again, each repetition sharp like a shard of glass cutting into me. Was it my age? Had I become too much of a burden to her? Was it my choices, my failures, that led to this? I thought I'd done enough for her. I was there when she needed help, when she was struggling. I had supported her through her darkest days, never once questioning what I was doing. I'd always thought she knew I was there for her. I'd given so much, and in return, I'd hoped for at least a little bit of respect, maybe even a sliver of gratitude. But what did I get? Rejection. I didn't know how to process it. My stomach churned, a mix of anger and confusion tightening within me. I thought of calling her, begging her to understand, asking her why. But I knew better. That wasn't me. I wasn't going to crawl back to her. Not after everything. I refused to be the desperate father pleading for a second chance. No, I wasn't going to make that mistake. Instead, my thoughts raced, moving through possibilities, plans, and ideas. The anger that had been simmering under the surface for hours now began to boil over. I needed to do something. Anything. This couldn't just be how it ended. My pride wouldn't let it. I got up from bed, pacing back and forth across the room. I could hear the faint sound of the wind outside, but inside, the world felt stifling, suffocating. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed control. I couldn't just let her walk all over me. She had no right to treat me this way. My mind continued to churn, a blur of thoughts coming together in fragments. I wasn't going to beg for her love. I wasn't going to ask her to take me back. But I could make her see what she'd done. I could make her regret this, even if she didn't realize it yet. The thought of it felt almost good. A way to reclaim the power that she had stolen from me with those few, cruel words. I wasn't just going to be the hurt father anymore. I wasn't going to be the victim of her coldness. I needed her to understand the consequences of this. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not when I had given so much of myself. And so, I began to plan. There were 100 ways I could make her feel what I was feeling right now. There were ways to make her life harder, to make her realize what it meant to push away the one person who had always been there for her. I could start small, pulling strings in places she wouldn't even notice. Subtle things. But they'd add up, and soon enough, she'd feel the weight of what she had done. She'd know the consequences of rejecting me, of casting me out without a second thought. I stood by the window for a long time, staring into the dark night, my mind racing with possibilities. She would regret this. I would make sure of it. And if she thought I would just let it go, if she thought I was weak, helpless, broken, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. 2 days passed. 2 long, agonizing days. Every minute without resolution felt like an eternity. The sting of her words still burned fresh, every thought haunted by that cold rejection. The anger, the confusion, it wouldn't go away. I tried to busy myself, tried to push the emotions down, but nothing helped. Her words echoed through my mind constantly, like a record stuck on repeat. It didn't matter how much I told myself I didn't care. The truth was, I did. I cared more than I'd ever let on. I couldn't let go of what she had done to me, and the longer I sat with it, the more it ate away at me. But I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to grovel. And then, the phone rang. I glanced down at the screen. The number was unfamiliar. My stomach tightened. I felt a strange mixture of dread and curiosity, and before I could talk myself out of it, I picked up the receiver. Hello. My voice was shaky, even to my own ears. I cleared my throat, trying to mask the tremor. Mr. Dalton, a calm, clinical voice came through the other end. This is Dr. Hansen from St. Mary's Hospital. There's been an emergency. Your daughter, Lily, she's here. She needs you. I froze. My entire body went still, the words slicing through the air like a blade. My heart leaped into my throat, choking me. Lily? What? An emergency? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. The anger and frustration from the last 2 days suddenly turned into a flood of panic. What happened? My voice was barely above a whisper. I had to know. I needed to know. She's in critical condition, Dr. Hansen continued, his tone measured and professional. There were complications during labor. It's her baby. She's in surgery now, but we need you here. She's asking for you. My world tilted, everything around me spinning. My legs felt weak, as if the ground had just disappeared beneath me. My thoughts were a blur. This wasn't real. There was no way it could be real. Lily, my daughter, my only child, was in critical condition. And the baby? What happened to the baby? I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. It was like everything had been stripped from me in an instant. I didn't even know how to react. Should I rush to the hospital? Should I be angry? Should I be relieved that she was asking for me after pushing me away just days ago? She's in critical condition, Dr. Hansen repeated, his voice a little more urgent. She's been asking for you specifically. Please, come as soon as you can. It's important. I didn't even know what I was doing at that point. I was moving, my legs carrying me to the door, my brain still trying to process what had just happened. I'm on my way, I said, before hanging up the phone abruptly. The words came automatically, like a reflex. But my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't focus. My heart was racing. All I could think about was her, my daughter, lying there, fighting for her life. I grabbed my jacket, barely aware of what I was doing. I didn't even lock the door behind me. The world outside seemed distant, like a different reality altogether. The hospital was only a short drive away, but it felt like a lifetime. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, my thoughts swirling with fear and confusion. The anger that had been consuming me just hours ago had dissipated, replaced by something far more desperate. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. I had been angry, but now I was terrified. As I walked through the hospital doors, my heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what to expect. The sterile, fluorescent-lit halls were silent, and yet the noise in my head was deafening. I didn't know what I would find when I saw her. Would she still be the same, distant daughter I had fought with? Or would this emergency bring us back together? Was I even supposed to be here? After everything, after the things she said to me, the thought of her in that sterile hospital room made my stomach churn. I didn't know if I was walking into a second chance or a final goodbye. I approached the reception desk, my mind still reeling. Lily Dalton, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The nurse looked up, her face a mask of professionalism. I'll let Dr. Hansen know you're here, she said, quickly typing into the computer. I could feel the seconds dragging into minutes, stretching out, each one heavier than the last. And then, all I could think was one thing. Please don't let her be gone. Please don't let this be the last time I see her. I rushed to the hospital. I didn't care about the time, the distance, or anything else. I could barely think. All that mattered was getting to her, to Lily. The words from the doctor still echoed in my mind. Critical condition. I had to see for myself. As I stepped into the hospital, the sterile, cold atmosphere only added to the anxiety gnawing at my insides. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on everything, and the white walls felt suffocating, closing in around me. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands clammy, my mind racing. I wanted to see her, needed to see her, but everything around me felt like it was happening too fast, too distant. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. A nurse appeared, her steps brisk and efficient. She didn't say a word as she led me through the hallway, her uniform a blur of white and blue. My legs felt like they were moving through quicksand, each step heavier than the last. I could barely keep up. The smell of antiseptic clung to the air, mingling with the sound of distant beeping machines. It was all too clinical, too cold. Finally, she stopped in front of a door. The room was just ahead, behind a thin sheet of glass. I could see the faint silhouette of a bed, the vague outline of someone lying there. I didn't know if it was Lily, or if it was someone else. It didn't matter. I had to get in there. Is she okay? My voice cracked as I spoke, barely above a whisper. I could feel my pulse thundering in my ears. The nurse glanced at me, her face unreadable. She seemed detached, like she had seen this too many times to show any emotion. She folded her arms. She's stable for now. But there are complications. Complications. I could hear the weight of her words. The dread settled deeper in my gut. Stable for now. What did that even mean? I didn't ask for more details. My mind didn't have the capacity to process it all. I just wanted to see my daughter. I needed to see her. The nurse opened the door, and I walked in, my legs shaking, my breath shallow. The room was dimly lit, and the constant beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the otherwise quiet space. Lily was lying there, hooked up to a maze of machines, tubes, and wires. Her face was pale, her eyes closed, but there was something so fragile about her, something that made my chest ache. The vulnerability of it all hit me like a punch. I stood at the foot of her bed for a moment, my mind struggling to catch up with the reality of what I was seeing. My daughter, the woman who had rejected me just days ago, was now here, fighting for her life. I wanted to reach out to her, to hold her hand, to tell her everything was going to be okay. But I couldn't. I couldn't find the words, and the fear was suffocating. I walked closer, cautiously, my eyes never leaving her face. The once defiant, strong-willed woman who had told me to stay away, who had shut me out of her life, now here she was, a shell of herself, lying motionless, fragile. A wave of guilt surged through me. Was it my fault? Had I been too harsh? Had I driven her to this point, to the breaking point? I tried to shake off the thought. This wasn't the time for self-blame. This was about her now. I pulled a chair up to her bedside, sitting down slowly. My fingers hovered over the edge of the bed, unsure of what to do. I wanted to touch her. I wanted to reach out and feel some connection, some thread of the bond we used to share. But I didn't. She was so still, so small in that bed, and I didn't know what the right thing was anymore. What if she didn't want me there? What if she didn't want to see me at all? I leaned back in the chair, my mind racing. The anger I'd felt just days ago felt distant now, like it was someone else's emotion. This wasn't about anger. It was about her. It was about the daughter I'd raised, the daughter who had told me she didn't need me. And now, here she was, needing me more than ever. A flood of emotions hit me all at once. The years of trying to be a good father, the years of giving everything I had, and yet, I couldn't even hold on to her love. But now, in this moment, I wasn't going to think about that. Now, I just needed to be here for her. That was all that mattered. I watched her breath rise and fall with the steady rhythm of the machines, each rise of her chest a small victory. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if she'd wake up, if she'd pull through, or if she'd push me away again when she was conscious. But right now, I didn't care about any of that. What mattered was that I was here. And she needed me. The hours passed slowly, each minute stretching on like an eternity. I sat by Lily's side, watching her, waiting. The beeping of the machines was the only constant sound in the room, a rhythmic reminder of the fragility of life, of how quickly everything could change. I didn't know if she would wake up. I didn't know what would happen when she did. But I had to be here. For her. Whether she wanted me here or not. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, her eyelids fluttered. For a moment, I thought I might be imagining it. But then her eyes opened fully, and she looked around the room, disoriented. Her gaze lingered on the ceiling, her brow furrowing in confusion. It was only for a split second, but in that moment, I saw the fear of the unknown, of what had happened to her, of not knowing where she was or what was going on. Then her eyes shifted to me. I braced myself. I knew what was coming. The anger, the resentment, everything I had felt before was still there, lurking, ready to surface. But nothing prepared me for the coldness in her gaze. The way her eyes hardened when she saw me. It was like a switch had flipped, and suddenly, all the vulnerability, the weakness, was gone. She was back to being the daughter who had shut me out. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, her voice hoarse but sharp. It cut through the air like a knife, filled with venom. Her words hit me harder than anything I could have imagined. I wasn't surprised. I knew it would come to this. But still, hearing her say it, hearing that anger, that bitterness, it felt like a betrayal in itself. She had been vulnerable, lying in that bed, depending on the machines to keep her alive. And now, here she was, furious at me for being here. I wasn't sure if it was the pain, the medication, or something else that made her so angry, but in that moment, it didn't matter. I steadied myself. "I came because you needed me," I replied, my voice measured. I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. Not now. Not in front of her. I may not be wanted, but I'm still your father. She didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at me with those piercing eyes. But her silence spoke volumes. I could see the resentment in her eyes, thick and heavy, like a physical weight between us. She didn't want me here. She didn't want me. Period. The words she had said to me before, the rejection, it all came rushing back. And now, in her state, she was still holding on to that same anger, that same fear. She looked away, turning her face to the side, avoiding my gaze. But it wasn't just anger that I saw in her. There was something else. Something deeper. Something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. Fear. It was subtle at first, hidden behind the sharpness in her eyes and the way she clenched her fists in the sheets. But it was there, clear as day. Fear that she had pushed me too far, that she had taken things too far. Fear that now, when she needed me most, it was too late. I saw it. She was scared. Scared that the damage she'd done to me couldn't be undone, that the walls she had built up between us couldn't be broken down. She wasn't angry anymore. She was scared. She was scared that she had pushed me away so far that there was no coming back from it. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, quietly, letting the silence stretch between us. I knew she wasn't ready to talk, and honestly, neither was I. I didn't know what to say to fix things. How could I? What had she expected? That I would just forgive her instantly, like nothing had happened? That I would forget the hurt, the betrayal, the coldness she had shown me? But then again, maybe that was exactly what she wanted. Maybe she wanted me to forgive her without question. Maybe she wanted everything to go back to how it was before, when I was her father, and she was my daughter, and nothing could ever tear us apart. I wasn't sure if I could do that. But I wasn't going to abandon her now. Not when she was lying in that bed, vulnerable, with no one else but me. The truth was, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I could fix what was broken between us. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to leave her. Not again. Not this time. So I stayed, sitting in silence, watching her sleep. The anger had faded, but the hurt was still there, just beneath the surface. And as I sat in the quiet, I realized that this was the real betrayal. Not what she had said to me, but the way we had both failed each other. The walls we had built, the words we hadn't said, the distance we had allowed to grow between us. And now, all I could do was wait, hoping she would see that I was still here, that I was still her father, despite everything. I didn't even realize it at first, not fully. It wasn't until I left the hospital, the sterile walls of the room fading into the distance, that the full weight of everything hit me. I had spent so much time caught up in the emotions, the chaos of the moment, trying to hold on to something that had already slipped through my fingers. But as I walked out into the cool night air, it became clear. I had gone to the hospital because I was still a father, still trying to hold on to whatever love Lily might have left for me. I wanted to believe that, deep down, despite everything, she still cared. But in that moment, as I walked away from the hospital, after seeing the coldness in her eyes, hearing the bitterness in her voice, it became undeniable. She didn't want me. Not now, not ever again. It was a truth I wasn't ready to face, but it was the only truth left. The rejection, the anger she had shown me, it wasn't just a fleeting emotion. It was real. She had betrayed me, not just with her words, but with her actions. She had chosen something, someone, anyone, over me. And for the first time in years, I felt a deep, gnawing sense of betrayal. It wasn't just about the things she had said to me. It wasn't just about the way she had shut me out. It was about everything. The years I had spent pouring myself into her life, sacrificing my own happiness, my own needs for hers, and now, all of that seemed meaningless. I had given everything, and she had taken it all for granted. She had discarded me without a second thought. I leaned against my car, my hands gripping the cold metal of the door. The weight of it all crushed down on me, and I let out a long breath, trying to steady myself. It didn't matter how hard I tried to hold on. It didn't matter how many times I convinced myself that things would get better, that she'd come around. The truth was staring me in the face. I wasn't wanted. And I wasn't going to beg her to want me. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Something I hadn't felt in years. Something that felt like freedom. It was strange, almost foreign. But it was there. A realization that had been waiting to surface. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I had spent so long trying to make things right, trying to prove myself to her, to win back her love. But I couldn't force someone to love me, not when they had already decided they didn't need me. And as much as it hurt to admit, that was what had happened. She had made her choice. She had chosen to cut me out of her life, to put someone else, something else, above me. I wasn't sure when it had started, this rift between us. Maybe it had been years in the making, slowly building, a series of missteps, misunderstandings, and regrets. Maybe I hadn't seen it coming, too caught up in my own efforts to fix everything. But now, I saw it clearly. And it didn't matter how much I wanted things to go back to how they were. I couldn't undo the damage that had been done. But as I stood there, in the dark, the harsh lights of the parking lot casting long shadows on the ground, something else began to settle in. I wasn't going to play the role of the victim anymore. I wasn't going to beg for her attention, for her love, for her approval. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let myself be trampled on anymore. I had spent enough years trying to make everyone else happy while ignoring my own needs, my own feelings. No more. I wasn't going to let her have that power over me any longer. I wasn't going to let her dictate how I felt about myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt a surge of something stronger than anger, something that cut through the hurt. It was determination. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. I wasn't going to let her rejection break me. I had to take control of my own life, my own happiness. I stood up straighter, pushing away the urge to fall apart. She had made her choice, and it was time for me to make mine. No more waiting, no more clinging to false hope. I was done being a victim. I had nothing left to prove to her. The realization hit me hard. I wasn't broken. I wasn't worthless. I didn't need her approval to feel good about myself. And that was the first step. The first step toward reclaiming myself. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if she'd ever come around, if we'd ever fix what was broken. But it didn't matter anymore. What mattered now was that I had finally seen the truth. I wasn't going to chase her anymore. I wasn't going to beg for a place in her life. I was going to move on. For me. For my own peace. And whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. The days dragged on, each one feeling heavier than the last. The anger I had been holding back began to simmer, pushing against the walls I had built around it. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The way Lily had rejected me. The way she had shut me out. The way she'd chosen someone else over me without a second thought. Every time I let myself think about it, the rage built up, knotting in my stomach, tightening in my chest. But there was something else underneath that anger. Something colder. Something I wasn't used to feeling. It was like an ice-cold clarity. A sense of realization that I didn't need her. I didn't need her approval, her love, her validation. The years of trying to earn her affection, of chasing after a relationship that had always been one-sided, it was all a waste. I had poured so much of myself into her, into us, and for what? To be pushed away? To be tossed aside like I didn't matter? No, I wasn't going to beg for her love. I wasn't going to plead for my place in her life, no matter how much it hurt. I wasn't going to lower myself to that. I wasn't going to beg for scraps of affection when I had already given everything. But as much as that realization settled in, there was still something else clawing at me. I couldn't just let her get away with this. I couldn't let her throw me away so easily, without facing any consequences. I didn't know what I was expecting, some grand act of revenge or some dramatic confrontation, but the fact remained that something had to be done. She couldn't walk away from me like this, without ever having to reckon with the damage she had done. She had betrayed me, and I wasn't going to let that slide. The thought of her living her life, moving on without any care for what she had done to me, was unbearable. I wasn't going to stand by and let her live in her bubble of indifference, as though I meant nothing to her. No. She needed to know. She needed to understand the consequences of her actions. It wasn't about revenge, at least not in the way I thought it might have been. I didn't want to destroy her. I didn't want to ruin her life. But I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. I wanted her to understand how deep her betrayal cut. She couldn't just push me aside and expect me to disappear without a trace. There had to be something more, something that would make her realize the mistake she'd made. The more I thought about it, the more the idea took shape. Subtle. Quiet. I wasn't going to go after her, not physically, not emotionally. But I was going to make sure that the path she was walking down wouldn't be as easy as she thought. I wasn't going to strike at her heart or her soul. I wasn't going to tear her apart. But I was going to make her question herself. I was going to make her regret taking me for granted. The thought of it gave me some peace. I knew I had a long road ahead, and I wasn't sure exactly what I would do. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this go unnoticed. Not by me. Not by her. I spent the next few days planning, trying to figure out how to make my move, how to let her feel the shift in power without her even realizing it. The hardest part was keeping myself in check. I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. I had to stay calm, stay controlled, and make sure that whatever happened next wasn't out of anger but out of a quiet, calculated sense of justice. I thought about the things she valued, the things she cared about. I thought about how she had surrounded herself with people who had taken her side, people who didn't care about me or my side of things. I thought about the way she had tried to cut me out of her life completely, as though I had never mattered to her in the first place. It made me sick, but it also made me think. I wasn't going to beg for her love. I wasn't going to chase after her, not anymore. But I wasn't going to let her forget that I had once been the person who would have done anything for her. I wasn't going to let her forget the bond we once shared, even if it was now broken beyond repair. I wasn't going to let her get away with acting like nothing had happened. The choice had been made. I wasn't going to sit back and wallow in my pain. I wasn't going to let myself be consumed by the hurt, the betrayal. I was going to rise above it. I was going to take control of my own life, of my own narrative. If she wasn't going to fight for me, then I wasn't going to fight for her anymore. But I wasn't going to let her walk away without facing the truth. She needed to understand what she had done. And she would. I would make sure of it. The plan was in motion, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something stir inside me that wasn't anger. It was determination. I was ready to move forward. The days passed, and I spent my time carefully crafting my next steps. Nothing too drastic, nothing that would make it obvious. I wasn't in a rush. I didn't need to see immediate results. This wasn't about a quick victory. It was about making sure that Lily felt the consequences of her betrayal slowly, quietly, until they became undeniable. I knew how to make things fall apart for her. I had seen her, heard her talk about her world, the people she trusted, the things she valued. I understood how everything worked in her life, where the cracks were, where the pressure points lay. It wasn't about outright destruction. No, it was about precision. The kind of precision that would leave her wondering where everything went wrong. I began making subtle moves. The first was with her career. I'd always been close to a few people who had some influence in her field, people who could make things difficult without anyone ever connecting the dots. It was a simple thing, a misplaced comment here, a slight misunderstanding there, a missed opportunity, a dropped ball. Slowly but surely, I planted small seeds of doubt about her competence and reliability. She wouldn't know where it came from, but I knew. And soon, she would start to feel it. Then, there was her marriage. She and her husband, Sean, had always seemed perfect to everyone else. The perfect couple. But I knew the cracks were there, just beneath the surface, hidden by smiles and public displays of affection. I took a few quiet steps in the right direction, just enough to create a little tension. A whisper here, an anonymous message there. Nothing overt, just enough to plant doubt and suspicion. Her relationship with Sean was far from perfect, and I was well aware of the fragile nature of their bond. It only took a small push to make everything seem uncertain. I knew the toll it was taking on her, even if she didn't. She was still focused on herself, on her life, on her recovery. She had no idea the storm I was quietly brewing behind the scenes. The cracks were starting to show, though. I could see them from where I stood, from the distance I had deliberately put between us. Her professional life began to falter, her confidence wavered, and she started making mistakes she never would have made before. I could almost hear the panic in her voice when she reached out for help, but no one was there to offer it. Slowly, the facade she had built for herself began to crumble. Her marriage was no better. Sean started pulling away, his attention scattered, his focus elsewhere. He didn't know what was going on, of course. He didn't know it was me who had put the pressure on him. But Lily could feel it. The tension, the distance between them. He was the one person she had always relied on. But now, he was slipping through her fingers. And she didn't even know why. It was beautiful, in a way. The way everything started to unravel so methodically, so steadily. She didn't see it coming, not in the slightest. She had no idea that everything she had worked so hard to build was quietly being destroyed from the inside out. And I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing it was me. No one would know. It was the perfect kind of revenge. She would never see me coming, and when everything came crashing down, she would be left in the dark, unable to grasp the full scope of what had happened. The consequences were just beginning to hit her, and she had no idea. At times, I would watch from the sidelines as her life continued to spiral. I saw the cracks widening. Her once perfect marriage became a battleground of misunderstandings and unspoken resentments. Her career, which had seemed so secure, began to show signs of collapse. And I could feel it. The satisfaction that came from knowing I had planted the seeds. It wasn't about hurting her directly, but making her realize, slowly and painfully, that she had no control anymore. Her world, the one she thought was so secure, was crumbling under the weight of her own choices. She had abandoned me. She had pushed me out of her life. But now, she would have to deal with the fallout of her actions. What made it all the more satisfying was that I wasn't a villain in her eyes. Not yet. She would never connect the dots, never realize that the quiet, subtle destruction of her life had been caused by the very person she had rejected. I was still her father, still the one she had cast aside, but now, I was something more. I was the catalyst for everything that was going wrong in her life, and she didn't even know it. The power was in my hands now. I wasn't going to stop. This wasn't about making her suffer, but about making her understand. She needed to know that there were consequences to turning your back on the people who loved you. And soon, she would realize that. But for now, I watched. I waited. And I felt the steady pull of satisfaction as her world continued to unravel. It happened on a quiet evening. I was sitting in my living room, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring out the window into the darkness. The world outside felt distant, almost like it wasn't real, as if I were watching someone else's life unfold. My mind was still consumed with what had happened, with the subtle unraveling of Lily's world. The satisfaction of watching her crumble had faded. Now, there was nothing left to do but wait and let everything fall into place. And then, just as I thought I could finally breathe, the doorbell rang. It was late, too late for visitors, and something about the sound made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I knew, deep down, it was her. There was no mistaking it. I opened the door, and there she stood. Lily. Her face was blotchy, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked fragile, smaller somehow. The confident, defiant woman I had once known was gone. The one standing in front of me now was a shadow, a reflection of the person she used to be, humbled by whatever had happened in her life since I had left. Her voice trembled when she spoke. Dad, I need your help. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, staring at her. The words she had said to me, the way she had thrown me away, still stung like a fresh wound. But seeing her like this, broken and desperate, did something to me that I wasn't expecting. For the first time in a long while, I felt something, sympathy, perhaps, but also something darker, something I couldn't name. You came here for help? I asked, my voice cold and measured. I wasn't sure how to react. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. After everything. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come at first. I could see her struggling, like she didn't know where to begin or how to make up for everything she had done. Finally, she said it. "You did this," she whispered, her voice so soft, I could barely hear her. "All of it. The problems, my marriage, my career. It's all because of you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. It wasn't what I expected to hear, but it was exactly what I needed. She knew. She understood. The realization was there in her eyes. She finally saw the consequences of her actions. She finally understood that I wasn't some passive figure in her life, some source of support she could take for granted. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The truth had already been laid bare between us. I didn't need to rub it in. I didn't need to tell her how right I had been, how everything I had done was justified. I had already made my point. The damage had been done. Her life was in ruins, and for the first time, she understood that it wasn't just random bad luck or circumstances that had led her here. It was the choices she had made, the way she had treated me. She stood there, her eyes filled with guilt, fear, and regret, but there was no redemption in her gaze. No plea for forgiveness. No real understanding of what she had lost. The guilt was there, sure, but it was too little, too late. She had reached out to me because she was desperate, because everything was slipping through her fingers. But I couldn't be her savior anymore. I couldn't be the one to pick up the pieces of her broken world. That wasn't my job. Not anymore. I could see her fighting back tears, her whole body shaking with the weight of everything she had lost. But there was nothing to fix. Nothing left to rebuild. I had already made my choice. I had already set the pieces in motion, and now, all that was left was for her to experience the fallout. She had to understand the cost of betrayal, the price of pushing away the people who loved you most. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible, "please, don't leave me like this." I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. The temptation to reach out, to hold her, to tell her that everything would be okay was there. It was strong. But it was a lie. It wasn't going to be okay. Not now. Not after everything. "I'm not going to fix this for you," I said, my voice steady but distant. "You made your choices, Lily. Now, you'll live with the consequences." I watched her face crumple, but I didn't move. I couldn't move. This wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about my pain, my betrayal. It was about her. She needed to understand what it felt like to be left with nothing, to have everything she took for granted slip away from her. She turned and walked away, her steps slow, her shoulders slumped. I watched her leave, not feeling the satisfaction I had once expected, but something else. Something deeper. Regret, perhaps. But I couldn't help her. Not now. She had come to me, asking for help. But the truth was, there was nothing left to save. The moment finally came. After all the waiting, the careful planning, the watching from the sidelines, we stood face to face in her living room. The air between us felt thick, charged with all the unspoken words, the years of tension and hurt that had accumulated between us. I could see it in her eyes, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her, suffocating her. She wasn't the woman I had once known. She wasn't the person I had spent years trying to protect. Lily stood there, her hands trembling slightly at her sides, her face pale and drawn. She had been through so much, and yet, I could still see that same stubbornness in her eyes. The same pride that had driven her to push me away in the first place. But now, it was different. The facade had cracked, and what was left was something more fragile, something I didn't recognize. "I didn't want this to happen," she said, her voice breaking. The words trembled on her lips, filled with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe. Regret, perhaps. But there was something else there, too. Something deeper. "I didn't want to hurt you." I let the words hang in the air for a moment, the silence between us stretching out, thick and heavy. I could feel the anger, the frustration that had built up inside me over the past few weeks rising again. But there was something else, too. Something colder. Something more final. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about understanding that this was it. This was the end of whatever we had been. "You did," I replied, my voice steady, though it felt like it was coming from a place that wasn't entirely my own. I had long since stopped being the person who had hoped for reconciliation. Now, I was the one who had accepted the finality of it. You hurt me more than I ever thought possible. But this. I took a step closer, meeting her eyes with a coldness that matched the way my heart felt. This is on you. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words never came. The silence that filled the room was deafening. I had waited for this moment for so long, but now that it was here, I found myself at a loss for how to feel. The satisfaction I thought I would get from seeing her realize what she had done, from watching her face the consequences of her choices, it was gone. There was no joy in it, no sense of triumph, just emptiness. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and I could see the tears that threatened to spill from her eyes, but I didn't move. I didn't soften. Not this time. The years of pretending, of giving her every part of myself and getting nothing in return, it had built up to this moment. And as much as I had once wanted to heal the rift between us, I had come to realize that there was nothing left to heal. Nothing worth saving. I know I messed up, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I pushed you away. But I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, as if she were bracing herself for something, anything. I didn't want to lose you, but I did. And now, look at me. Look at what I've done. I didn't move. I didn't speak. The truth was, I had spent so long living in that fear too. The fear of losing her, of being rejected by the one person I had cared about more than anything. But now, it was just a hollow ache. It wasn't even pain anymore. It was just empty. Like everything I had done for her had been for nothing. She took a step toward me, her voice trembling again. Please, I'm sorry. I know it's too late, but I can't live with myself knowing what I've done. But I couldn't hear it anymore. The apology didn't sound real. It was too little, too late. And though part of me wanted to reach out, to pull her into my arms and say everything would be okay, I knew I couldn't. Not anymore. She had burned every bridge, and I had already made my peace with it. No, I said softly, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. You don't get to do this. You don't get to walk back in here and expect me to fix it. You had your chance, Lily. You had every chance to make things right, and you chose not to. I saw her flinch, but I didn't care. I didn't care about the guilt on her face. I didn't care about the tears in her eyes. I had been the one to care. I had been the one to try. But now, there was nothing left. No more energy to give. No more love to offer. You have to live with what you've done. I continued, my voice quieter now, but steady. I won't fix this for you. I won't be your safety net anymore. Her face twisted with sorrow, but I didn't soften. I couldn't. And as she turned away, her footsteps heavy with regret, I finally understood something. Revenge hadn't been the goal. Not really. The goal had been to free myself. Free myself from the weight of caring too much, from the burden of love that had been one-sided for too long. And now, as she walked out of my life for good, I felt nothing. Nothing but the quiet echo of my own relief. As time passed, things changed. Slowly, but inevitably, Lily's life continued to spiral. It wasn't immediate. Not the way I had imagined it in those early days when I first began to set things in motion. No, the consequences of her actions unfolded more quietly than I had expected, like a slow-moving storm gathering strength in the distance before it finally hit. Her career, once so full of promise, began to falter. She missed deadlines, lost clients, and started to fade from the spotlight she had once commanded so easily. The small failures piled up, unnoticed by most but impossible to ignore by her. She began to doubt herself in ways I never thought possible, her once sharp confidence dulled by an invisible weight. Her marriage, her perfect marriage, as everyone had once called it, began to crack. The tension between her and Sean grew, a quiet, unspoken strain that nobody acknowledged but everyone could feel. They fought more, their conversations turning colder, less affectionate. Sean withdrew, and she, desperate for reassurance, began grasping at things that no longer existed between them. She reached for him, but it was too late. The distance between them had already been created, and no amount of pleading or regret could close that gap. I watched it all from a distance, silently observing as everything she had built began to crumble. The truth she had denied for so long was finally becoming clear, but it was a truth she wasn't prepared to face. She had made her bed, and now she was lying in it. The choices she had made, the betrayal, the selfishness, the way she had discarded me, the one person who would have given everything for her, had set a series of events into motion that she couldn't undo. And yet, I felt nothing. At first, I thought I would feel a sense of satisfaction, a kind of victory in seeing her face the consequences of her actions. I had waited for this. I had worked hard for it, and I believed it would bring me some kind of relief. But when it came, when her world began to collapse and she realized the depth of her mistake, I found myself unmoved. No joy, no pleasure in her suffering, no vindication. There was only emptiness. A quiet hum of justice working in its own way, without fanfare or celebration. I thought about the things I had done, the subtle moves, the quiet manipulations that had pushed her to this point. I had spent so much energy, so much time, crafting the perfect revenge. But now that it was happening, now that the weight of her choices was crushing her, I felt nothing. I thought I would revel in the downfall, in watching her suffer the way she had made me suffer. But there was only a strange calm that settled over me, a realization that this wasn't what I had truly wanted. I hadn't wanted her life to fall apart. I hadn't wanted her to lose everything. I just wanted her to see what she had done. I just wanted her to understand the consequences of pushing me away, of taking me for granted. And now that she did, now that she could finally feel the weight of her decisions, I found that I didn't need to watch her suffer anymore. I had already gotten what I needed, the truth. The days dragged on, and I kept up my distance, my life moving forward in ways I never thought possible. I was healing, not because of what had happened to her, but because of what had happened to me. I was no longer bound by the need for her approval. I no longer craved her love or validation. The chains that had once held me to her had finally been broken, and in their place was a strange, quiet peace. When Lily reached out again, it was a whisper. She was a shadow of the woman she once was, a fragile version of herself that barely resembled the confident, self-assured person I had known. I knew she wanted to fix things, to somehow undo the damage she had caused, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. The truth was, I had no interest in fixing it. There was nothing left to fix. I had learned that the hardest part of revenge wasn't the act itself. It was realizing that the satisfaction of it was fleeting. In the end, revenge didn't heal the wounds. It didn't make things right. It didn't bring back the love or the connection we once shared. All it did was expose the truth of what had been lost. And that truth was all I needed. Lily had her moment of reckoning. The karma that had been silently unfolding in her life was not a punishment in the way I had once imagined it. It was just the inevitable result of her own actions, the natural consequences of everything she had done. And now, as I stood on the other side of it, I realized that the only victory I had ever truly needed was the one I had found within myself. The victory of walking away, of reclaiming my own peace. The rest of her life was hers to live. And as for me, I had already moved on. Months passed, and life continued, as it always does. It wasn't easy, but over time, I had moved on. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my peace. The bitterness that once consumed me had slowly faded, replaced by something I hadn't expected to find, freedom. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for myself again, no longer weighed down by the past, by the guilt, or by the anger that had once clouded my every thought. But there was still something there, a quiet, hollow ache that lingered deep within me. It wasn't something I could easily ignore, no matter how much I tried. It was the ache of losing her, the person I had once loved so deeply, the person I had invested so much of myself into. Lily. She had been my world for so long, and even after everything, there were moments when the thought of her, of what we had once shared, would creep into my mind. I never expected to lose her like that. I had always thought she would be there, no matter what. But I was wrong. And in the end, it was my own fault for believing in something that wasn't real, for holding on to a connection that was never as strong as I thought. But life, as it always does, had a way of moving forward. And so did I. There were days when the ache was more pronounced, when I would find myself thinking about her, wondering what she was doing, how her life was going. But those thoughts came less frequently, and when they did, I didn't let them control me. I had learned to live without her, and for the first time, I was learning to live for myself. The anger that had driven me for so long was gone. The need for revenge had evaporated. What remained was a quiet strength, something that I couldn't have imagined in the midst of the pain. I didn't need her anymore. I didn't need anyone who didn't want me. And that realization, though painful, was the final piece of my healing. I had finally let go. I had finally understood that my life didn't have to be defined by her betrayal, by her rejection. It was mine to live, and I was going to make the most of it. One day, as I was going about my business, the phone rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something told me who it was. I hesitated for a moment, unsure whether I wanted to pick up, unsure of what would come next. But then, I answered. Hello. My voice was calm, controlled. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Dad. It was Lily's voice. It was strained, quiet. I need to talk to you. Can we meet? I didn't answer right away. The past few months had been about moving on, about building a life without her, about finding peace. The thought of reopening that door, of letting her back into my life, made me feel uncertain. I had closed that chapter, and I wasn't sure I wanted to open it again. But in that moment, something shifted within me. I didn't feel anger, or even sadness. I felt nothing. I had already won the battle. Not through vengeance, not through punishment, but through the painful process of reclaiming my power. I had turned my pain into something stronger, something that no one could take from me. No, I said simply. We don't need to meet. There's nothing left to say. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could hear her breathing, the weight of my words sinking in. And yet, I didn't feel the need to say more. There was no point in rehashing the past. I had already moved on. I had already let go. I hope you're okay, I added, my voice softer now, but still firm. But I can't be the one to fix this for you. Not anymore. And then, I hung up. As I stood there, looking out at the world, I realized that this was it. This was the closure I had been seeking. I had faced my pain. I had fought the battle and come out on the other side stronger. I didn't need to carry the weight of her betrayal any longer. I didn't need her approval, her love, or her apology. What I had found within myself was enough. I had walked away from the past, from the pain, from the person who had once meant everything to me. And as I did, I finally felt free. Free from the hurt. Free from the need for revenge. Free to live the life I was meant to live. If you've ever experienced betrayal, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think karma really comes around, or does revenge change everything? Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories full of twists and justice.